I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of our investigation is the mysterious disappearance and murder of Suzanne Morphew, a mother of two. A twist in the case led to a renewed push from prosecutors to find her husband, Barry, responsible. Here's the story. On Mother's Day 2020, Suzanne Morphew vanished from her home in Chaffee County, Colorado. Her bike was found abandoned on a remote trail, but Suzanne was gone without a trace. What began as a missing persons case soon spiraled into a complex investigation riddled with secrets, suspicion, and heartbreak. Suzanne, a beloved mother of two, had been texting a lover and expressing fears about her troubled marriage. Her husband, Barry Morphew, insisted she'd been killed by a mountain lion. But investigators uncovered deleted messages, GPS data, and inconsistencies in his story. In 2021, Barry was arrested and charged with her murder, but with no body, insufficient evidence, and ethical issues connected to the prosecutor, the case was dismissed without prejudice. Then, in a shocking turn, in September of 2023, Suzanne's remains were discovered in a shallow grave nearly 40 miles from where she disappeared. Now, almost 2 years later, her husband Barry has once again been charged with her murder. You know, this is a case where I wasn't 100% convinced that they would file charges once again, but once they found Suzanne's body, it changed everything here. But for Barry Morphew, he didn't necessarily stick around and wait to see what was going to happen. I want to bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's been following this case for us. So yeah, there was time, right? He was arrested, then he was let go, and then he was free to do whatever he wanted to do. So when they charged him again, where did they find Barry Morphew?
Well, Vinny, that's the interesting part, because they found him more than 600 miles away from where him and Suzanne lived in Salida, Colorado, to a small town outside of Phoenix, Arizona called Cave Creek. Now, public records show that Morphew paid property taxes at the Stardust Trailer Park in Cave Creek, which can be interpreted as this is the town where he lived. This is where he settled in after those initial charges were dropped. And if you look at your screen right there for our viewers, this gives context to how far away these two cities were. 644 miles away, hours if you were to take a car. Now, Barry was actually, Vinny, arrested in Goodyear, Arizona. Now, that is also just a suburb outside of Phoenix, about an hour away from Cave Creek. But Vinny, what's interesting about his time in Arizona is that he was not going by his real legal name of Barry. Take a listen to what prosecutors said about his aliases in a recent bond hearing.
Judge, the court specifically asked defense counsel whether or not the defendant has been using any other name. And obviously we can talk about the reasons why the defendant might have been doing that. But it's not just his middle name that he's using. He's using a last name that doesn't have any relationship or connection to his given name at birth. He's using the name Lee Moore, which is not related to anything that the defense has presented. Specifically, he's using it to conduct business in Arizona, and that's the concern that people have specifically. In addition, Judge, the court asked whether or not he's been in another state for a substantial period of time. Well, I don't have any facts to dispute what defense counsel represented. I would note that the defendant has been traveling frequently with two vehicles, interchanging license plates on those vehicles.
So Barry is using these aliases while living in Arizona. You heard the prosecutor there, Vinny, reference Lee Moore. That was one of his aliases that he was using to conduct business. Now, Vinny, he frequented a bar in Cave Creek, Arizona, and the manager at that bar spoke with FoxNews.com. He told them that he knew Barry as Bruce and didn't know Barry's real name until the reporting came out following his re-indictment. But what we also have, Vinny, we also have a photo obtained by FoxNews.com of Barry with a woman. You see him there shaking this woman's hand. This woman's name is Libby Spruill. Now, she says she was at the bar in March of 2024, the same bar where this bartender knew him as Bruce. She said that Barry Morphew asked her if she wanted to dance. The bartender said Barry was sort of a ladies' man. Here's what she told Fox News. It says, quote, He walked out to me and he said, "Hi." He's like, "Do you want to dance?" And I said, "You're Barry Morphew." So she recognized him from reporting Vinnie. Sproul said, at the time, according to Sproul, Barry Morphew said, no, I think you have the wrong person. A bit later, Sproul said an individual approached them and introduced Barry Morphew as Lee from Indiana. So, Vinnie, we have Bruce, according to the bartender, and then we have Lee from Indiana, according to this woman. No pun intended, Bruce and Lee. You really can't make this up. But the Lee from Indiana one is interesting, Vinnie, because Indiana is where Barry and Suzanne lived before they moved to Colorado. And of course, according to that recent grand jury indictment, he used Lee Moore to conduct business while he was in Arizona. Now, what else do we know about Barry Morphew? We know while living in Colorado, he was a landscaper and a private contractor, neither of which he was licensed to do while he was in Arizona. Now, public records show that he was self-employed, but it didn't specify what that self-employment was. But according to the recent prosecution's response to a defense motion to reduce bond, it clearly outlined that Barry Morphew has a history with Arizona. It says, quote, "While jailed, he has communicated about the value of the stock he sold and the substantial rental income he is collecting on his properties in Arizona. The defendant has used and continues to use an alias. He refers to himself as Lee while he has been in custody and appears to continue to conduct business in Arizona using that alias." So Vinnie, even behind bars, he's still referring to himself as Lee Moore. So it's quite apparent that he was living this whole new life under these multiple different aliases while in Arizona.
Fascinating, really fascinating, because he's got 2 daughters as well. All right. Cody's going to stick around during the course of the hour, but what we learned here brings us to the first question in our investigation. Why was Barry living a secret life? You know, is there an innocent explanation for it? Is there a not innocent explanation for it? Let's bring in some guests to help answer that question. Private investigator Lauren Vellucci is with us, as well as Colorado-based attorney Stephen Longo. Great to have you both here. Lauren, what's your suspicions here on why Barry was living this secret life, or is it Lee was living this secret life in Arizona?
Yeah, I suspect that he knew his goose was cooked, and he was trying to get as much of life as he could before he knew he was going to be tried. I mean, the evidence against him is damning, and they didn't do this with prejudice. So he, like they said, he was a ladies' man. I wouldn't put it past him to have been trying to wife up some new lady out there and swoop her off her feet. Who knows?
Let me ask you, Stephen, is there an innocent explanation for why he would assume these aliases and live this life in a trailer park out there in Cave Creek?
I think the most innocent version you could have of it is that it's tough to go to a bar and try to pick up women. It's tough to try to conduct business with people when you have been on the national news as being effectively charged now twice with killing your wife. So that's as innocent as it's going to get for me. I think that's probably the most reasonable explanation. And like any good lie, it's usually wrapped in some truth. The name, not so much, but the fact that he created this alias that he kept, that he was from Indiana. I'm sure there was other truthful things as part of the persona he created. I think what's most interesting about it is he created 2 aliases, which when we're creating an alter ego or something that we're trying to get away from the name Barry Morphew, I don't know why you complicate it and convolute it with 2 names, right? With Lee Moore and then also known at the bar as Bruce.
Yeah, Lauren, the other thing is the life he's living down there in Cave Creek. We know the house he was living in with Suzanne Morphew. What a beautiful home. Big, beautiful, expensive. He's living in a trailer park. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is quite different than living in a home like this. Do you think that was a choice based on finances or just trying to sort of blend in and not stick out?
I think it was a little bit of both, if I had to take a guess. I think that he's a smart man. He had business dealings that were going well. Obviously, he was successful. And I think he knows that he's going to need the money that he has to have a decent defense. And I think he knew it was only a matter of time. But I also think that, yeah, if he was under the radar, blending in with, small town folk, maybe, he was less likely to be known as Barry.
Stephen, can anything from this new life be used against him, or is it just sort of irrelevant at the point that he gets tried inside a courtroom for the murder of Suzanne?
I think what happens inside the walls of the courtroom, it's frankly irrelevant. But when we look at the court of public opinion, and Barry Morphew is not looking good, really has never looked good in the public's eyes, I don't think this is a very good look for him. I don't think any of the things we've heard from his conduct in the bar, whether it's the bartender saying he's kind of this ladies' man and trying to pick up multiple women using different aliases, it appears to be tradecraft and the behavior of a person that, frankly, would, concoct these stories and engage in this type of stuff.
Yeah, the deception, the deceptive, and the life that he was living, such a fall from grace. Lauren and Stephen are going to stay with us. Coming up next, how big is the so-called BAM evidence?
The remains of Suzanne Morphew after an autopsy contained a chemical compound that Mr. Morphew had almost exclusive access to.
Saturday nights on ION is our night. Let's go! Double headers every Saturday at 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
She kisses Joy and says, "Sorry, I love you."
Was this an accident or murder?
And that is where the truth begins to get twisted.
The Kiss and Kill murder trial. Trial coverage weekday mornings 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I can announce today that the 12th Judicial District Grand Jury returned an indictment. The grand jury has indicted Barry Morphew on the single count of murder in the first degree.
Murder in the first degree, and a big difference was the fact that they found Suzanne Morphew's body. First time around when they charged him, they didn't have a body. Now they do. I want you to take a listen to the prosecutor talking about some of the evidence that was found as a result of being able to recover Suzanne Morphew's remains.
The remains of Suzanne Morphew were found. The remains of Suzanne Morphew were found. The remains of Suzanne Morphew after an autopsy contained a chemical compound that Mr. Morphew had almost exclusive access to, tying him directly to the remains of his wife. The case in 2021 was arguably entirely circumstantial with no body. This case is very different.
So what exactly is that chemical compound that they found in Suzanne Morphew's remains through the autopsy? Cody Thomas takes a look.
In the grand jury indictment, the district attorney explains the drugs found in Suzanne Morphew's bones. It's, quote, a chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of butyphenol, azaparone, and medetomidine. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that comprise BAM were present. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of BAM intoxication. BAM could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. The compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constrictions to the recipient's ability to breathe. records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. The prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. Barry Morphew used BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he had tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence.
And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. And this may be a very important one. How big is the so-called BAM evidence in this case? What story does it tell? How much impact on the jury? Here to help with our investigation, private investigator Lauren Bellucci and Colorado-based attorney Stephen Longo. Let me ask you, Lauren, what picture gets painted in your mind when you hear about this BAM evidence?
Well, first, let me start off by saying it was kept in a locked safe in the family's home. So that limits who had access to it. Then to hear that her bone marrow had these chemicals of BAM in them tells me that she had started to metabolize it. So this death that Suzanne experienced, I can't personally think of a more painful death, and it's law enforcement's theory that Barry chased her around the house with this dart rifle, terrorizing her, hunting her. I as someone who experienced domestic violence when I was young in a marriage, I cannot fathom what Suzanne went through, and this BAM evidence is damning.
Stephen, I want you to take a listen to what the defense had to say about this evidence inside the courtroom.
So far as the indictment, Your Honor, as the court knows, that is a cherry-picked piece of narrative that has been created exclusively by the district attorney, using agents by the district attorney, and by going through the grand jury, there is no opportunity for the defense to be able to publicly rebut anything that has been said. That is but mere allegations, and arguably and laughably, oftentimes wrong and incorrect. The BAM that the district attorney mentions that Mr. Morphew had access to, I want to be clear on, was prescribed to him in the state of Indiana in 2018. Mr. Morphew has not had access to BAM since 2018, and the indictment says that nobody in the immediate region, meaning the 12th Judicial District, who was not otherwise lawfully prescribed BAM, had access to BAM, leaving out the fact that Mr. Morphew himself has not had access or prescription to BAM since 2018, and ultimately, law enforcement did not find any BAM in Mr. Morphew's residence, in his garage, or in his gun safe. And so this narrative that the people put in their indictment that Mr. Morphew has ties to and access to BAM and is completely silent to the fact that that was an out-of-state prescription legally prescribed to him for a deer farm that he had not owned in years, in my opinion, is something that is not particularly relevant to this court's analysis.
Stephen Longo, looking at the BAM evidence now, how big is it? How big will it loom in the courtroom? And is there any sort of innocent explanation for this?
The BAM evidence is massive. This can't be understated enough. It won't be readily dismissed. There won't be some easy explanation. BAM is a cocktail sedative that is effectively has one supplier in the entirety of the United States. It is heavily regulated. And Barry Morphew, whether it's from a prescription in Indiana or Colorado, regardless, is the only person who should legally have it in the state of Colorado when the murder is committed. That's aside from any government agency, Forest and Wildlife have it. This is the type of stuff they use to relocate bears that might find their way into residences and things like that. It's that powerful of a sedative cocktail. So the evidence that this is found in Suzanne's Morphew bone marrow is huge. I don't think there's any way that Barry Morphew or his defense team can escape this.
Yeah, Lauren, you know, one of the things the defense was arguing there is that they didn't find any. That's like, well, he got rid of it. We know he had it at some point, and he got rid of it. To me, that fact can be, you know, spun in either direction and can make him look really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, he admitted to having it. He admitted to having it to shoot deer so that he could de-antler them, or whatever the correct term of that is, which is illegal. So he admitted to having it. And then also the needle cap of the BAM that he didn't have, it was in the dryer with a pair of shorts that he was caught on video wearing the day of the murder.
Yeah, the last time we had evidence that was found in a washing machine or a dryer was the Jodi Arias case, the camera with all the pictures. Big thank you to Lauren Vellucci, Stephen Longo. Great to have you on. Up next, was the relationship a motive for murder? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the mysterious disappearance and death of Suzanne Morphew, a mother of two who disappeared on Mother's Day in 2020. With the focus squarely on her husband, Barry, many questions remain about how this trial may play out. Here's the story.
Mother's Day 2020 dawned with eerie silence in the mountains of Colorado. Suzanne Morphew, radiant and athletic, vanished without a trace after a supposed bike ride near her Chaffee County home. Her bicycle was found tossed in a ravine intact, yet haunting. As days turned into months, a desperate search unfolded across some rugged terrain. Drones, dogs, and volunteers combed the wilderness, but Suzanne's body remained hidden. Her daughters, torn between grief and loyalty, stood by their father, Barry Morphew, who insisted she was taken by a wild animal. Yet, whispers of marital tension, secret messages, and GPS data began to surface. In 2021, Barry was arrested for her murder, but the charges were dropped after the prosecutor ran into ethical problems connected to the case. Then, in September of 2023, a grim discovery. Suzanne's remains were found buried nearly 40 miles away. The news shattered her daughters, reopening wounds once thought to be healing. Now, almost 2 years later, Barry Morphew has been re-indicted for his wife's murder.
In cases of spousal murder or the accusation of spousal murder, it's so important to understand what was happening between the accused killer and the victim, because they are married, they are together. At one point, they loved each other. Let's check back in now with Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's been following this case for you. Cody, what do we know about Barry and Suzanne's relationship and what was going on here before she disappeared and before she was killed?
Well, Vinny, in short, based on early interviews of Barry at the beginning of this investigation, Barry seemed to be somewhat in denial about the status of their relationship, saying it was wonderful and it was great, but in actuality, it was riddled with allegations of affairs on both sides. And the recent grand jury indictment dives deeper into their relationship. It says, quote here, Vinny, in early interviews with Barry Morphew, he told law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was the best and that the two had a wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about their relationship, Barry stated no. Barry Morphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witness accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading to her disappearance. She discussed plans to divorce Barry Morphew with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of problems in the relationship recovered from electronic devices and the physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne Morphew had been having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who lived out of state. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic message to anyone was to this person on May 9th, 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before Barry Morphew returned to the home that day. And Vinnie, this indictment refers to that last message on May 9th, 2020. We have this picture right here. See it there on your screen of Suzanne. This is a picture that she sent to this person that she was having an affair with. Now, this photo was sent on the same day, May 9th, as her last electronic message ever. But it's unclear whether this picture that she sent to him was the last message, but still sent on the same day. Now, Vinnie, back to the indictment, it says, quote, a forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry Morphew had deleted a text chain with Suzanne Morphew from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May 6, 2020, so 3 days before the referenced prior, Vinnie. That image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly. So, Vinnie, Suzanne was having this affair, but she also had suspicions that Barry was having an affair of his own, so much so that she went out and bought a spy pen recording device. But it kind of backfired when she went to use it. So at a hearing in 2021, attorneys on both sides discussed some of the evidence, including data from this spy pen. The pen revealed to investigators that Suzanne was having an affair for 2 years. Now, it was Suzanne's pen. She got it to record audio, hoping to catch Barry having this affair. But instead, the pen recorded audio capturing Suzanne talking on the phone to her lover. She traveled out of state at least 6 times to be with this lover. Now, this man lived in Michigan and had a wife and 6 children. And as it relates to the murder, Vinnie, investigators did clear him in relation to this case. So needless to say, Vinnie, their relationship was not on the best terms based on this information.
No, but they have the daughters, they have the family, but it's clear, Cody, from your reporting that things were not good. Thanks so much, Cody Thomas, helping us out tonight. That brings us to the next question in our investigation. When you've got a relationship like this, was the relationship a motive for murder? She was killed. She was found 40 minutes away from her home. Was this a motive for murder? Here to help answer that question is former felony prosecutor and Colorado criminal defense attorney, where all this is happening, civil litigator Eric Faddis is with us, and the host of Crime Shack, the Crime Shack podcast, Michelle Pence is here as well. Thank you both. Eric, I'll start with you. Out in Colorado, what are your thoughts about this seemingly crumbling relationship? Does it turn out to be a potential motive for murder?
Yeah, Vinny, certainly a tumultuous relationship, no question about that. If you're the government, you're saying, hey, his life was crashing in all around him for Barry Morphew, and he received this text from his wife saying, I'm done, and that pushed him to the limit. He said, hey, if I can't have you, nobody can. That could be seen as a motive. On the other hand, the person with whom Suzanne was having an affair, she'd seen him 6 times over the course of 2 years. Did he have some motive to try to want Suzanne all to herself? Did the woman with whom Barry was allegedly having an affair have some sort of motive in terms of getting Suzanne out of the picture? I think there are a lot of potential motives here.
That's interesting. Michelle, what I find interesting, though, is the timing. She's sending this picture, she is smiling, and then shortly thereafter, Barry comes home. What are your thoughts?
Right, exactly. And Eric made some good points and poked some holes into it pointing to Barry. Suzanne, it was apparent the marriage was crumbling. The marriage was deteriorating. She was checked out of the marriage. She had been having an affair for 2 years. Barry knew about the affair. She sent that picture on the screen. probably minutes before she was murdered. So that was a huge motive for Barry. He knew that Suzanne had checked out. He knew that she was done with the marriage, and Barry could no longer control her, and Barry wasn't going to have it. So he did what Barry does best. He hunted her down in her own home, just like he had done with animals many times before.
Eric, you know, and I know we're going to hear this because I've heard it. I can't tell you how many times over my career at Court TV that just because someone cheats or someone's having an affair, it's not a motive for murder. So, but I don't think it's so much about his affair. I think it's about her affair, and I think it's almost a little different. Like if she is like throwing it in his face, then all of a sudden you get to a place where, you know, someone could snap. It almost becomes a crime of passion if you walk in on your wife sending pictures to her lover.
A very fair point, and if that's how it played out, certainly that is problematic for Barry Morphew. I mean, there are a lot of things that could bring a person to act desperately, to go to great lengths, and of course, issues in a marriage is one of those things. But that being said, you know, it's not something the prosecution has to prove. They never have to prove motive, but the jury's going to want to hear about it. They're going to want to hear, hey, what was the reason the government is saying Barry did this? And this is a pretty darn good one if you're the prosecution.
Yeah, but Michelle, picking up on what Eric said, I think it's incumbent in this case for prosecutors to establish in front of the jury that they investigated everyone that both of them were sleeping with. Because if it's a motive for one, it's a motive for another. If she's having an affair with a married man with 6 kids, he may want her out of the picture. And as Eric said, I think it's valid if he's with some woman, that woman may want her out of the way so she can sink her teeth into Barry and you know, all the money and the beautiful home and everything else. So I think that's going to be an important part of this case for this jury to be told or to learn that police didn't have tunnel vision here.
Right, absolutely. And I think if they have done their due diligence, they would have done that. So I would hope this prosecution team is much better than the first ones, and that they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's and checked out everybody who could have been involved in this, particularly the man that Suzanne was having the 2-year affair with. I'm sure they checked him out thoroughly, as well as his alibi. So, and it comes down to this, I think, and I think the jury's going to see this as well. The simplest explanation is usually the right explanation. Suzanne was there in her home at the time she went missing. She was in that location. Barry was there as well. So I think you can only look so far for the answer, and I think it's going to be very simple for the prosecution to nail that home.
All right, our guests are staying with us when we come back. How much impact will the daughters have on the trial?
The two, what I would consider most significant victims of this matter are strongly supportive of Mr. Morphew's innocence and are strongly supportive of his release.
Coming soon to Court TV.
The Microsoft executive gunned down. Now his ex and her new husband are charged with his murder.
Brian Walsh, accused of murdering his wife, Anna.
It's very disturbing, very heart-wrenching.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
This has been one of the most powerful images in the case of Barry Morphew because he and Suzanne had 2 girls, and they're young women, you can see, and they are 1,000% behind their father. They do not believe he had anything to do with this and have been standing by him. Don't forget, Suzanne went missing on Mother's Day and was presumably murdered on Mother's Day. Her daughters weren't there during the day, but they were supposed to meet up later on because they were out of town on that day. So I want you to take a listen to the judge who had to make a ruling on whether or not Barry Morphew would or would not get some opportunity for bond or for bail. And the judge spoke about Barry and Suzanne's daughters. Take a listen.
There are several factors that weigh in Mr. Morphew's favor. Mr. Morphew has the support of his family, and he alleges several friends both inside and outside of Colorado. However, he did not identify those friends even in the sealed version of his motion. And his family lives largely outside of the state, and at least one family member lives between two states, neither of which are Colorado. That being said, I do note that, no disrespect to any of the other individuals who are statutory victims in this case, but the two, what I would consider most significant victims of this matter, are strongly supportive of Mr. Morphew's innocence and are strongly supportive of his release, and I do take that very seriously. Your opinion matters a great deal to me.
And of course, the judge there is talking about the two daughters. They're victims in this case, as their mother is the victim. So they are the victims. And they're, again, sitting behind and standing up for their father in all of this, and clearly impacted the judge, who then gave Barry Morphew an opportunity to, if he can come up with the ability to do it, to actually bond out in this case. So that brings us to the next question in our investigation. How much impact will the daughters have on the trial? Obviously, they impacted the judge to a certain extent. Will they impact the jury in Barry Morphew's trial? Here to help with our investigation, former felony prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and civil litigator Eric Faddis, and the host of the Crime Shack podcast, Michelle Pence. Michelle, what are your thoughts about Barry Morphew's daughters in this case?
The daughters have been public supporters of Barry since day one. They have stated that they know their father the best. They know that he's innocent. As you saw, the judge empathized with their plight and, gave Barry an amended bond because of their statements in court. And I think the jury will have I would say, somewhat sympathy for them. I won't think that it will be extensive, but I think that if anything, it will humanize Barry to the jury. But one thing I think we need to keep in mind is, and I think this is a huge part of the case, neither daughter was at the Morphew home at the time that Suzanne went missing. Neither daughter was there during those hours that whatever happened in that home. So they are not witnesses, and even if they testify, I think that'll be a huge part of the case and a huge factor in discrediting really anything that they have to say in terms of what happened during that time period.
I just lost my audio here for 1 second. There, I got you back. I lost you for 1 second there, but thank you so much. Eric, how much impact do you think the daughters will have on this trial, and how will it manifest itself inside the courtroom?
Gosh, well, Vinny, I can't even fathom what these young women are going through to lose their mother, have their father accused. They probably haven't been able to grieve this. Some could argue they might be in denial, or perhaps they know full well who their father is and what he's capable of. If I'm defense, I might even put them on the stand, and I might ask, who better knows the relationship dynamic? Who knows the exchanges between Barry and Suzanne? Who knows what Barry is capable of? And if there's anybody who knows that, it would be the daughters who have been with them their entire lives. And they have stuck by Barry's side from the very beginning. Defense is going to ask them, hey, did you have any suspicion whatsoever that your father murdered your mother in this case? And they're going to say absolutely not, ×2 on the stand. And I think that can go a long way in the jury's mind.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking what I would do as a prosecutor after that, Michelle. I would, unfortunately, and I have to do it very gently, but I would ask the daughters, did you know about your mom's 2-year affair? Did you know about your father's extramarital affairs? And I wonder if they did, Do you think that they knew about all of that, Michelle?
They might have. If they did, I think Suzanne may have told them something at the time that Barry found out so that Barry wouldn't have told his daughters about the affair. But I think something that we have to think about in terms of children and their parents. Children, for the most part, and in this case, we have adult children. Children do not want to realize that their parents are capable of a horrendous act like this. They don't want to believe that. The denial is strong. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind in terms of the daughter's relationship with both parents. They're going to look at them in the best light possible.
Yeah, Eric, they're going to be in the courtroom, even if they testify, right, Eric? They because they're victims in the case, they can sit there the entire time. And when you go in a courtroom, I always describe it to folks who've never been there for a criminal case. In most courtrooms, it's kind of set up like a wedding, a bride and a groom, but it's prosecution's defense, and we know where they're going to be sitting. How about that?
Yeah, Vinny, that's right. And you know, how much of the trial they'll get to observe will depend on a few factors, including the scope of what's called the sequestration order, whether the judge will allow the potential witnesses in the court the entire time. Certainly, as victims in the case, they have an interest in being present for the entire trial. Different judges go different ways on that. But what side of the courtroom are they going to sit on? If history is any indication, they're going to be right by their father's side. They're going to be right behind him. And you better believe that jury is looking over at Barry Morphew, but they're also looking at the gallery behind him. Who supports this guy? Who's behind him? And that can, even though it might not be part of the evidence, it might not be something they're lawfully allowed to consider. They're human beings back there, and that presence, that support can truly make an impression.
Yeah, these cases, Michelle, like this, are so difficult on the children, whether they are adults or small. I don't think it really matters. To be put in the middle of all this is such a tough spot.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I feel for the daughters. They've lost their mother. They're going to potentially lose their father. Their father's currently in jail, although I think he'll probably post bond fairly quickly here, just to keep the appearance of innocence in front of his daughters going. So yeah, I feel for them. This is very difficult for them. They're going to have a difficult road ahead. No matter what happens, I think they'll always have this stain on their family to live with.
Yeah, difficult situation. Big thank you, Eric Faddis, who is in the middle of all of it out there in Colorado. We appreciate it. Michelle Pence, host of the Crime Shack podcast. Thank you as well. We'll see you both really, really soon. Now, I have unfortunately covered many trials where a spouse is accused of the murder of their loved one. And in cases where they have children, even adult children like here, it's rare that they will ever turn on the surviving parent. But when they do, it's devastating on the defense, and I have seen that firsthand. The question is, after all the evidence is in, will Barry Morphew's daughters still believe in him? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.